Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Community Talk of May. This Community Talk is dedicated to the research project on fostering sustainable shark fisheries in Tanzania. And the project used the approach of multi-stakeholder partnership. We would like to welcome Dr. Cyrus Rumisha of Sokoine University of Agriculture in Tanzania and Professor Marc Cosius of the Free University of Brussels. Before digging in, allow me to make 3 practical announcements. Throughout the presentation, you can raise your questions already in the chat. But after the presentation, there is enough room for Q&A, so we will make sure to discuss them there. During the presentation, please mute yourself. However, during the Q&A, you can unmute yourself, put your cameras on, and direct your questions to the presenters. And this community talk is being recorded, so we can share it afterwards on our YouTube channel. So voilà, be aware that the talk is being recorded. So without further ado, let's dig in. We hope you enjoy the community talk, and I give the word to the professors.
Yeah, hello, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining. Yeah, both of us, Cyrus and I, will give the talk, but mainly Cyrus will give the presentation. I will only give some parts because, yeah, this work was done in Tanzania under the leadership of my colleague, Dr. Cyrus Rumisha. So he will give most of the talk. Hopefully the internet connection to Tanzania is stable enough. Otherwise, yeah, I will take over. So maybe Cyrus, you want to say a few words before I continue? Oh, I can't hear Cyrus. Hopefully he will be back. So then I will just continue. So together we had a project on facilitating multi-stakeholder partnership to foster sustainable shark fisheries in Tanzania. The project started in 2020, or actually September 2019, and then was, at least on the Belgian side, very much hampered by the COVID lockdowns. So, and due to COVID, I had no possibility to go to Tanzania during the course of the project. There was a plan to send a student in 2020 from the VUB to Tanzania for fieldwork, but due to the lockdown situation, this also didn't work out. And only, when I remember correctly, in 2021, we could send 1 student to Tanzania, and then also 1 master student from Sokoine University came to the VUB. In Tanzania itself, there were not many restrictions, so actually the colleagues in Tanzania could do the project, but the exchange between the VUB and ZUA, Sokoine University of Agriculture, was very much hampered, unfortunately. So before we go to the details about the project, first a video about the diversity and beauty of rays and sharks. But now I can go to the next slide. So yeah, sharks play a very important role in the ecosystem as top predators. but the problem is that we now have half a century of global decline in oceanic sharks and rays. The situation for coastal species isn't much better. So this is a graph from a publication from 2021. And on the x-axis, you can see a timeline from 1970 to 2020. And on the y-axis, the Living Planet Index, which is an index about population sizes from the Living Planet project. And if you set the population sizes of 1970 as 1, you can see, or as 100%, you can see that there is a steady decline in the abundance of sharks and rays in the last 50 years, which is mainly due to fishing effort. So sharks are themselves targeted mainly for their fins, but they're also bycatch in many fisheries. And from the same publication, you can see here a graph showing this for major species of sharks and rays, and except for the smooth hammerhead, who showed an increase over the last 50 years, all other species have a decrease. For example, here the dusky shark going from 100%, if you set 1970 as 100%, to only 28% of what was there in 1970. White-tip shark, oceanic white-tip shark, only a quarter of what was there. So in many species, we have quite drastic declines. Also here in the rays, like in the manta rays, there are drastic declines, which are mainly due to fishing activities. So now we will come to the situation of shark fisheries in Tanzania, and I hope that Cyrus is now around to take over. Cyrus, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Mark.
Okay.
Okay. For the case of Tanzania, shark fisheries plays a critical role in livelihood of many coastal communities in Tanzania. In Tanzania, the fishery is largely utilized by artisanal fishers, but incidentally, sharks are also caught by commercial fishers in commercial fishing, targeting other fish like tuna, but also other fisheries. The main fishing gears in Tanzania are largely long lines, gill nets, damaso nets, but also drift nets. Max, can we go to the next slide?
Oh, Cyrus, I can't hear you.
Next slide.
Probably when your connection is not so good, it takes a while before the slide is changing. Should be now slide number 6. What you see. I hope the other participants can see that slide.
Yes, we can see slide 6.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you see the slide?
Okay.
Now we cannot hear you. I don't know if you're trying to say something. Otherwise, maybe Mark can continue instead.
Yeah. Cyrus, we can't hear you. Can you hear us? Oh, it seems, unfortunately, the internet connection in Tanzania isn't good enough. So then I think I will continue. So what about the situation of shark fisheries in Tanzania? As said, there's a targeted fishery, but also bycatch, for example, in gillnets. And harvested sharks and shark-like rays are largely sold on local markets. On the
Hello?
right side. Yes? Is it you, Cyrus? Can't hear you.
Yes, I'm back. I'm sorry.
Ah, okay. So then maybe you can continue.
I don't think the connection is strong enough, so maybe it's better if you continue, Mark. Mark, now you are muted as well. Yes, this is better.
Okay. Good. Then I will continue. So sharks and shark-like rays are harvested on the market. So on the right-hand side, you can see a picture of a shark. And on the left-hand side, yeah, sharks landed at the shore. And so large sharks are sold in pieces and small sharks are sold as a whole. So there is also a market for shark meat in Tanzania. So there on the right-hand side, you can see pieces of shark meat, and yeah, they are sold fresh or also frozen. There are also other processed forms like fried, sold, dried, as you can see on the right side on the bottom. And shark meat is also fermented for preservation. So there are many different forms of shark products on the local markets in Tanzania. Large species and those with valuable fins are fins. So the fins are removed, as you can see on the right-hand side. And these fins sold then to collectors and are exported. There's a huge market for shark fins in Asia, mainly China. I think, as most of you probably know, shark fin soup is made out of that. And yeah, it's something that you want to offer your guests in China because it's a delicacy, or supposed to be a delicacy, and very expensive. Maybe one anecdote about that. Years ago, I was on the Indo-Pacific Fish Conference in Taiwan. And as usual, there was then a conference dinner. And yeah, as a starter, we got shark fin soup, even though on the conference there was a session about all the threats on sharks. So that's so deep in the culture in these countries that even on such a conference where we discuss how to protect sharks, at the conference dinner, you get a shark fin soup, which from my point of view wasn't very special anyway. So we have overfishing, we have illegal fishing, and climate change. And so shark populations are also declining in Tanzania, not only worldwide. And more than 70% of shark species in Tanzania are threatened with extinction. So this is, again, the global picture. If you set the base at 1970, we have a decline down to 71% of many species of sharks. So in Tanzania, what are the measures taken to do something about it? There is an establishment of MPAs, Up to now, there are 18 MPAs. Gear restrictions are introduced to avoid bycatch. Then there is a ban on shark finning and a regulation of 2021. And some species are protected by a fisheries or by the fisheries regulation 66 from 2009. This includes the whale shark, Christis species you can see on the left bottom side, and then other species like the great hammerheads, eagle rays you can see on the right bottom side, pelagic trashers, and oceanic white-tip sharks. So there is legislation about it, but yeah, the problem is not only in Tanzania but in worldwide, the proper implementation and of the regulations and control of the fishery. Even though shark finning is banned, you still see sharks where the fins have been removed that are landed. The shark fin trade still persists. And there is also the chance that protected species are traded among traded fins and other products. So there is basically an illegal shark fin trade in Tanzania going on. So what was the aim of the project? So this was a problem setting. What is the situation that we are facing? So the aim of the project was to reveal the composition of landed and traded sharks and rays in Tanzania, which contributes to the aims of the Sustainable Development Goal 14, life below water. Specifically target 14.4, sustainable fishing, but also target 14.5 to conserve coastal and marine areas. It also goes into the direction of supporting small-scale fisheries in that sense, that small-scale fisheries have to go on, and there needs to be management measures that enable still a small-scale fishery, but avoids the bycatch and catch of sharks. So the Sustainable Development Goal 14 is central for this project. The colleagues in Tanzania, Cyrus Rumisha, you can see here on the picture on the right, collected samples. Maybe I should introduce the colleagues. I hope you can see my laser pointer. So this is Dr. Cyrus Rumisha, who was a PI of the project in Tanzania. Then I think this is Robinson Mecca, also working in this project, Alex Nehemia, and a master student, Rehema Joseph. So they mainly conducted the field work along the Tanzanian coast. On the right-hand side, you see the map. So they collected 112 tissue shark and shark-like rays from landing sites. So in Tanga, Nungwi, Dar es Salaam, Gilavi, and then in the very south, Mtwara, close to the border of Mozambique. Then they also collected 164 dried elasmo branch fins from shark fin traders in the 3 main fishing markets in Tanzania. You can see here on the map again, Dar es Salaam, then down here close to Mtwara, and then here in the county of Lindi. And here you can see Cyrus preserving the samples. So sample preservation for genetic analysis is very easy. You just preserve the samples in absolute ethanol in these small tubes, and then you can keep them easily at room temperature, and only later on when you're back to the laboratory, you preserve them either in a refrigerator or in a deep freezer. So once the samples are in the lab, so what are the different steps? You do a DNA extraction of the sample. You make a gel electrophoresis, so to check if you have good quality genomic DNA. Then, based on this DNA, you do a PCR, a polymerase chain reaction, to amplify your marker gene. So the aim here was to identify the shark species, to get an idea which shark species are fished and can be found on the market. Because if you want to do a management, first of all, you need to know what is caught and what is traded. And a good method to identify species without ambiguities is to use genetic markers, the so-called DNA barcoding of a certain gene of the mitochondrial genome, which is called CO1, cytochrome oxidase 1. And here on the top right side, you can see a chromatogram. So this is the readout of the sequencing. So every peak with different colors here stand for a base in the DNA sequence. And so this DNA sequence, so the order of the nucleotides, is species specific. So this can be used as a so-called DNA barcode to identify species, similar to a barcode that you find on products in a supermarket. So this is done by Sanger sequencing. And then based on these sequences, you can do an analysis, which is called BLAST, which means you compare the sequence of your CO1 marker gene, of your DNA barcode, with an internet database called GenBank. And in this database, you have millions of sequences. And you can compare your sequence to the database to figure out which species it is. Just a moment. Okay. So here are some results from the landing sites. So which species are found on the landing sites? 23 species were found at landing sites. And here you can see the table with the 23 species. And here the percentage. So how much was the relative abundance? So there were some species that had a rather low abundance, others had a much higher abundance. And then here in this column, you can see the IUCN red list categorization. So the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, IUCN, has a so-called red list where the conservation status of species is evaluated. And the ones that are shown here in red, they are critically endangered. So we have here 2 species that are critically endangered, and then also a couple of species that are endangered. Vulnerable is not that bad yet, VU. And then there are also species where we actually don't have data. Then in the last column here, you see cited listed species. So what is CITES? CITES is an international treaty for the protection of species that are traded. One well-known example is ivory of elephants, which is completely banned for trade. So they have the highest protection. And then other species are listed on a so-called appendix. There are 2 appendices. I'm sorry, but the program is automatically changing the slide. It's really a bit odd. So there are 2 appendices. Appendix 1 means a complete ban of the trade, for example, ivory of elephants. Appendix 2 means trade is allowed, but it is controlled. So there needs to be an export permit. And if it goes to the European Union, there needs to be an import permit. And permits should only be given if the trade is not endangering the species in that country. So there are also a couple of species that are listed on the CITES appendices, Appendix 1. So they can be traded, but only with a permit. But CITES only refers to international trade between countries. So inside a country, CITES is not regulating any trade. And so about 5% of the landed fish species are protected, what was found in that study. So here you can see the different categories. NT means near threatened, so the categories of the IUCN red list. So NT is near threatened, VU is vulnerable, EN is endangered, and CR is critically endangered. So this is the percentage of the different categories of the endangered species that were found at the landing sites. So there is quite a number of critically endangered species, but also endangered, a little more of vulnerable and also a certain percentage of near threatened species. So looking at the traded fins, there was a total of 11 species found. So these were samples taken from dried fins from traders. And about 70% of the traded fins were sourced from threatened species. And in this donut chart, you can see the percentage for the traded fins if they are near threatened, green, vulnerable in yellow, endangered in orange or red, critically endangered. And you can see there's quite a percentage that is critically endangered. And 91% of the species of this 11 species in the traded fins are on Appendix 2. So that means if they will be exported from Tanzania, for example, to China, there must be an export permit. Otherwise, it's illegal to export them. So here, the results for the species from the traded fins, from the total of species, these were about 9%. And as already shown on the previous slide with the different categories, I can see here, for example, in red, we have the critically endangered species, or here another hammerhead shark, also critically endangered, or the bottlenose wedgefish is also critically endangered, and they're also listed on CITES Appendix 2. So then also survey was done with people involved in the elasmo branch fin trade in Tanzania. And also fisheries officers. So 130 fishery officers were interviewed, fishers, fish traders, and fish processors that were asked a number of questions about their point of view regarding the fin trade. There are problems to track the trade routes. So 2/3 agreed on that. There's a lack of awareness of the people involved in that shark fin trade. Also, a majority, 2/3, agreed to that. There is limited surveillance and limited monitoring resources, also about 2/3 agreeing to that. For the authorities, there's insufficient training to identify the trade routes and the offenders. So these are the main issues, and there's also, most people agreed on that, there's an underreporting and limited data on the illegal trade. And unfortunately, there seems also to be a political interference in enforcement efforts. Also, a majority agreed to that. Yeah, there is also high market demand for shark fins, mainly in China, driving this trade and the fishery, or at least driving the issue that there's not much done against the bycatch, because bycatch is a nice extra money, bycatch of sharks, because you get the shark fins. There are legislations that should minimize the catch, and even the trade in fins is banned in Tanzania, but still it takes place because the legislation is not sufficiently enforced. So in this table, there's an overview about the stakeholder opinions on effective measures to regulate the elasmo branch fin trade in Tanzania. Okay, a large majority agreed that there needs to be a specialized training for law enforcement. There also needs to be a public awareness on the impact of the elasmo branch fishery and its unsustainability, actually. There needs to also be more funding to ensure enforcement of the legislation. Also, the majority agrees on that. And the local communities along the coastlines, majority agrees that they should be included in the monitoring, and this is seen as very effective. Also, stricter laws are seen to be effective, and also the majority thinks that strengthening anti-corruption measures will be effective, and also there needs to be collaboration with international organization. And recommendation, total ban of elasmo branch fin trade. Okay, I mentioned already in the beginning of the talk, the cooperation in the beginning of the project was quite difficult because due to the COVID lockdown, the measures here in Belgium were very strict, so you couldn't leave the country even. While in Tanzania, it wasn't a problem as far as I understood, so there was still free movement possible, while in Europe and in Belgium, we had to stay in our houses, and we're not even allowed to travel within the country, not to talk about leaving the country. But anyway, in 21, it was then possible that one VUB master student, Caroline, you can see here on the picture on the right side, went to Tanzania and then worked together with the Tanzanian master student, Rehema Joseph. And they conducted fieldwork together, and then worked also together here at the VUB in the laboratory. At some point, then it was possible to travel from Tanzania also to Belgium. So Rehema came to Belgium, to the VUB, and worked here in the laboratory. And then in I'm not sure, I think it was 2022, there was an event at the VUB where then also the Flemish Minister for Development Cooperation was visiting the VUB and got some introduction on different projects between the VUB and partners in the Global South. And so the two students were then presenting their results from their field work in Tanzania here on that poster. Yeah, so far we have one published manuscript from that project on the fact that DNA barcoding reveals endangered and protected elasmobranchs in Tanzanian fish markets. And hopefully we can continue with that work also in the future and have more joint publications. And at the end, I would like to thank you for listening and joining the community talk. And then also many thanks to FLIR OS for supporting the study. It was a South Initiative project for running for 2 years. We got a little bit an extension due to COVID. Then many thanks to Sokoine University of Agriculture for providing the research clearance, and then also the fisheries officers and fishermen in the study area. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Very insightful. So far, there were no questions in the chat, but I would like to open the floor. If you have a question, please raise your hand and then unmute yourself, put your camera on, introduce yourself, and feel free to direct your questions to the speakers. I see Mr. Hugo Ducret. I will give you the floor.
Hi, Hugo.
Hi, Mike. How are you?
Fine. Thanks for joining.
Sure. Yeah. I was one of the master students supposed to go to Tanzania during lockdown, so it wasn't successful at the time. But it's really cool to see how this project went after that. So that's really nice. I had this question also about something that I've been looking at when I first worked on the project. So most of the data here and like all the species names that are out of it are mostly named in Latin, like the Latin species name. And I was wondering how this data is also like how you include also the local Swahili name of the endangered species in like the output of like as the outcome of the project, especially when it comes to like enhancing public awareness in the like the global sustainability of the fisheries. I guess it has to also the species the Swahilian name, right?
I think that's a question Cyrus best could answer. I hope
Yeah.
Cyrus can hear us. And Cyrus, can you unmute yourself and maybe give a reply?
Okay, hi, Hugo.
Hi, Cyrus. How are you?
If you look at, I'm doing fine. I'm sorry, I had the internet connection problem. Sorry,
Okay.
I couldn't finish the presentation. If you look at the tables, we tried our level best. Of course, we know Latin names are not English names, so it would be difficult for a reader or for law enforcers or other policymakers to comprehend what we wanted to communicate. But what we did, we included both the English names and also the common names. And also, in the end, we have another project which is also funded by FRAME, which is implemented in collaboration with the VUB, SUA, the Sokoine University of Agriculture, and the Kenya Marine and Fisheries Research Institute. And then we also intend to communicate our results during workshops for that project. So there are some workshop activities planned in that project, which is still going on. And then during the workshop, we also intend to communicate our results because actually the same stakeholders, some of the workshops will be done in Tanzania, but also will be done in Kenya. So during these workshops, also intended to disseminate our findings to policymakers and other stakeholders who might be interested in our results.
Okay. So like fishermen and policymakers, they have of course then access to okay. Okay, I see. Cool. Well, congratulations anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hugo. Are there other questions in the audience? Maybe meanwhile, I have a small question myself. I was very interested in the multi-stakeholder partnership approach. And so you mentioned in a presentation that you involve the stakeholders to provide their opinion on the effectiveness of different measurements. But can you give a bit more information on who these stakeholders were, how you identified them, and what were the benefits, but maybe also the challenges in obtaining a multi-stakeholder partnership approach?
Yeah, I think also Cyrus, you better can answer that. Due to the lockdown situation, I couldn't go to Tanzania.
Yes, due to the lockdown, also in Tanzania, we could not organize a workshop because it was prohibited to. It was not possible to do some kind of workshop or seminars. But what we did during the sampling and also during data collection, we tried to engage as many stakeholders as possible, including fishers, but also fisheries officers and village leaders, ward executives, and other people at the local level. So we engaged them during sampling, also during the survey. We also interviewed them to assess what could be the factors perpetuating this trade and what measures would be effective.
Oh, I'm afraid the connection to Cyrus is gone again.
Yeah, it looks like.
I'm sorry, my internet was off.
No problem.
Maybe can you repeat the last sentence? Maybe we missed the part.
Sorry. So can I continue?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
I wanted to say that we couldn't conduct a workshop during that period because of COVID restrictions. So we tried to engage as many stakeholders as possible during data collection, and we talked to different stakeholders involved in the trade, but also in the shark fisheries. And then, as I said earlier, we plan to do a workshop during our ongoing project. And then during that workshop, we will also engage stakeholders and communicate the findings of this study.
Okay, very clear. Thank you. I'm gonna have a look at the audience again. If there are more questions, something that wasn't clear or something you want more details on, feel free to put your questions in the chat or to raise them directly to the speakers.
Can I jump in?
Hi.
Anything in the chat? Hey, yeah, I'm Steven. I'm a PhD student working at the VUB also on rays, and I've been to Tanzania too. It's a great place. And I was a bit curious. It's great work, and I was also curious. I went to the fish market, and I know that some sharks and rays are caught as bycatch, and another proportion I know are also targeted. So you have some traders who actually target big sharks and big rays and actually sell them to actually go out for that. And you also have a lot that are just caught as bycatch and gill nets and such. And I was wondering if you had any idea the proportion of all of this research, so the proportion of sharks and rays that are caught as targeted organisms, and the proportion of sharks and rays which are caught as bycatch. Because that, of course, would impact a lot the conservation and the implementation of conserving this biodiversity in anatomy banks. And so, yeah, I was curious if you had any idea of that.
Yeah, as far as I know, this we didn't look into that, but Cyrus maybe can give more information. He was in the field.
We tried to identify some species which are targeted. For example, for the case of fins, as you can look at our data, we have about 11 species which are targeted. And and the other species, in total, we found the 23 species among the landed specimens, but out of these 23, it's only 11 species which are targeted for the fins, and the rest are not targeted for the fins. And then if you can look at the table, we also included a proportion, the contribution of these of each species in the either in the total catch, but also in the fins. And then from there you can get an idea of which species largely targeted and which species are not targeted by the fishers.
Okay, cool, thanks. And are any ray species targeted? Because you don't sell their fins, but I mean, they're still eaten. Are there any that are targeted specifically for consumption, or is it mainly bycatch? Do you know?
For the rays, we found, for example, white-spotted the wedge fishes. They were among the commonly targeted fishes but for their fins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the white-spotted the wedge fish, they accounted for a big proportion of the sampled fins, around 15 or 16% of the total fins we sampled. So it gives an idea that those were were among the main targeted species. But also we found some species which are protected as it was presented by Mark. We found actually 3 species which are protected by Tanzanian law, but still these species were also targeted by the fishers, both in the fins, but also they are also still landed at landing sites in the country, which also gives an idea that there is a weak enforcement of the existing regulations.
Okay, thanks so much.
Any more questions?
There is a question from Francesca Benson. Francesca, go ahead. You can raise your question.
Morning. Thank you very much for the presentation. I learned a lot. I'm Francesca and I'm joining in from Zimbabwe. So from the survey that was done, I was just wondering community, the importance and the other benefits of preserving ecotourism opportunities. Because I feel like if the communities that are involved in this trading and selling.
Oh, the connection is really bad. Francesca, maybe you write your question or comment in the chat.
Yeah, indeed. The audio was on and off. So as Max said, raise it in the chat. Maybe that might be easier. Another question that comes in the chat, does the study's recommendation depend on the interview results or on the IUCN Red List standard?
I would say on both of it. No? On both of it. On the one hand, I mean, still, let's say the gold standard to have an idea about the conservation status of a species is to look at the red list of IUCN, even though the last update for many organisms is quite a while ago. There is also a problem of manpower, that there are enough specialists evaluating the species, and there are more and more species added to the list. So it's more and more effort, but still, yeah, that's a major source to have a general idea about the status of the species. But then for sure, it's also important to talk to local fisheries officers, basically to both sides in the country. On the one hand, the authorities, fisheries officers, their task is to implement the regulations, which do not allow a targeted fishery and the shark fin trade. And on the other hand, also talking to the other stakeholders that are involved in the catch of them and the further processing or trade of these species. I don't know if the connection to Cyrus is still good and if he has something to add.
I'm sorry, I did not hear the question. My connection was not good.
The question was, does the study's recommendation depend on the interview results or on the IUCN Red List standard? My point of view is that, yeah, it's based or must be based on both.
Yeah, it's the same. It should be based on both.
Mhm. Then I see in the chat another question. Is it possible to extend this study to other countries in the African Great Lakes region? Yeah, as Cyrus already said, we are currently together in a project with colleagues from Kenya, in a project on small-scale fisheries, also funded by FLIR OS, a Teams project, which will run for 5 years, which gives you much more time also to have then the workshop Cyrus was talking about, which we, with the stakeholders, which we couldn't do during this project, which was focused on sharks due to the lockdown situation. But yeah, we will now continue that in the framework of the new project called Safe Fish on small-scale fisheries in Kenya and Tanzania. So in that sense, yeah, we have extended the study. But yeah, maybe one comment on that. Sure, we want to work with as many partners in the region, and I had also in the past cooperation with Madagascar, for example, which is not Great Lakes, but we're working marine, not in the Great Lakes. So with Madagascar, we had cooperation with colleagues in Mozambique, but it's always not so easy to find a funding scheme that allows you to include so many partners. And for FLIR OS, there are certain countries on the list for projects, other countries not. For example, Madagascar is not on the list for projects, so we can't officially include Madagascar. Now, in the Safe Fish project, we try to do this, to include partners from Madagascar without a budget, but they can still participate. But yeah, FLIR OS only allows, when I'm not wrong, only 2 partners in a project, 1 main partner and one additional partner. So we are actually happy that after this project on sharks in Tanzania, we were able to have now a project with Kenya and Tanzania to continue on this fishery issue.
Thank you. It's always nice to hear that a project is either upscaling or has a spillover effect. So that's really nice to see. And indeed, with the Teams project, you have more budget, more time. So already curious to see what that will lead to again. I will give for the last time the chance for people to ask maybe their last questions, if there are any. I asked Francesca again to raise her question in the chat, but I'm not sure if she received it. If I'm correct, I'm seeing one person, Majirsa. Sorry for the pronunciation. If you have a question, I propose this will be the last one. So go ahead, please.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I watched it. I find it very nice for the presenters. My question is, apart from trading of this shark, what other issues are responsible just to dwindle for the number of shark fish there, especially in the case of climate change, pollution, maybe, if I'm not mistaken. Thank you very much.
So I mean, what is the impact of climate change and pollution on the
shark?
Yeah,
apart from trade, illegal trade, I think that was the main issue that brings us together all stakeholders there with respect to this project. So my question is, how do you see the effect of climate change apart from this illegal trade, especially?
Yeah, I would say climate change, and I would say then we're mainly talking about increasing temperatures, and that is a main issue. I would say for these species. So this is an additional pressure on these populations of the shark species. Due to climate change, we have changes in the ecosystem. Think about coral bleaching, for example. So then large areas of coral reefs might just disappear due to coral bleaching. So basically the basis of a coastal ecosystem might be lost or lost in large parts, which surely has a very strong impact also on population sizes of sharks and rays that depend on these coastal ecosystems like coral reefs, which are under threat by bleaching, which is due to increasing sea surface temperatures. So this is an additional threat.
Thank you very much. I'm from Ethiopia, Salale University. That's why I'm asking you this question. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Okay, then Francesca wrote something in the chat. She wrote, my question was not important. My question, was it not important to help the Tanzanian community to understand the importance of preserving shark species in relation to their own benefit in terms of ecotourism opportunities that help generate revenue and job creation? Yeah, I mean, if you have ecosystem, or if you have ecotourism, so that means you have people coming that are very much interested in nature and want to see, for example, sharks, then for sure it would be very important to preserve the sharks. But I would say this is just a small part of potential revenue and job creation that can be generated. I mean, in general, we have to see to have a sustainable fishery, because fishery itself is extremely important for the daily livelihoods, and it must be done in a sustainable way to keep this resource also for future generations. And ecotourism might be a small part of it. But I would also say, coming back to climate change, as long as we do not have reduced CO2 emissions of long distance flights, or fuels that are CO2 neutral, then this ecotourism will also add to CO2 emissions, to climate change, to increase sea surface temperatures, to coral bleaching, which is then destroying a very important coastal habitat. That's my point of view. I don't know, Cyrus, you want to add something to it? I hope the connection to you is still there. I'm afraid connection isn't there.
I'm afraid, yeah.
It's already 12 o'clock.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I see all the questions have been answered.
Sorry, my audio was not good. I did not hear the question.
There was one more question, Laura, by Francesca Benson.
Yes, that has been answered now by
Okay.
yeah. Cyrus, yeah, no problem. We can see you have problems. That's a shame, but fully understandable. But yeah, it's at 12 o'clock, so let's close off this very, very interesting community talk. First of all, we would like
to say something before we
sure. Yes.
Yeah, so actually, like 90% of the presentation was done by my colleague Cyrus Omisha. The plan was that he's going to give it because he, with his colleagues and students, did the research in Tanzania. So many thanks to Cyrus for running the project in Tanzania, for the time taking to make the presentation. So maybe the presentation wasn't at some points not so smooth because I was not supposed to give it. So I did my best. I hope I brought the message that Cyrus intended to give with this presentations. And yeah, I'm very glad that we had this project together and that we now can continue in a new project, all financed by FLIR OS. And I also would like to thank FLIR OS because the whole cooperation with Cyrus is based on FLIR OS funding. He got a scholarship to follow a master program. At that time, it was called EcoMama, for ecological management of marine resources, which then was changed into ocean and lakes. Then he got funding from FLIR OS to do his PhD at the VUB. And then we got funding for the South Initiative, the Shark project, and now we have funding together with colleagues from Kenya, also from FLIR OS, in a Teams project. And this is now a cooperation that started 2010, actually, when I started my position at VUB, or 2011. So he was one of my first master students I had in my lab. So I think this also shows that the funding of FLIR OS is very important to start such long-lasting cooperations of now more than 10 years.
That's very nice to hear. Thank you so much. And indeed, it's inspiring to see where it all started with a scholarship, and now also what is still ahead with the Teams project that is currently being outrolled. So that's really nice to see. I would also like to thank the audience for attending the community talk. Thank you for your attention, your participation. We believe it's beneficial to share experience and insights. So thank you for that. And of course, also special thanks to the speakers, Dr. Cyrus Omisha and Professor Mark Kosius, for this insightful presentation and discussion. Congratulations with the accomplishment and progress made despite all the COVID-related challenges. But we also look forward to the further upscaling and continuation of this project. And yeah, despite the connection problems, we were able to gain a lot of insights in your project and to have meaningful discussions. So we're really grateful for that. And finally, I would also like to welcome everyone for the next community talk that will take place on Wednesday, June 26th. And by coincidence, we'll also cover a topic on Tanzania, but more on health. The topic is improving health of school children with a new community-based intervention. So sounds very promising as well. So stay tuned, check our website, our social media platform, and stay up to date. Thank you for attending, and we wish you a lovely day, everyone.
Okay, bye-bye. Thanks for attending and for the questions. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Cyrus, and hope next time we have a better connection to talk.
Thank you, Mark and Cyrus. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day.
Bye-bye.